The lead engineer with silver hair and hollow eyes stared blankly at the diagnostic screens that had become his silent adversaries. Jake Peterson, younger but equally defeated, muttered possibilities that evaporated into the dry air. The problem was elusive, a phantom glitch in the thrust vector control system. They had stripped it bare, piece by piece, only to be met with the cruel grin of mystery. Hours passed. Solutions died. Hope thinned like the distant horizon. That was when I arrived, small, unnoticed, yet tethered to this disaster by invisible threads of fate. My sneakers crunched softly against the polished floor, drawing puzzled glances. I was only 10. What business did a child have in this world of billionaires and defense contracts? Clutched tightly in my hand was my father's old military badge. Its brass dulled by time but heavy with silent stories. My voice trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of purpose. "I think I know what's wrong," I said, my voice slicing through the thick air like a desert hawk. Every eye turned toward me, skepticism, irritation, even amusement flickering like mirages in their stares. But I stood rooted, the desert wind outside humming like an old lullaby, because deep within that broken machine, I saw the same flaw that haunted my own life. Something crucial had been overlooked, small, invisible, but devastating. And in that moment, everything began. I am Chloe Adams, 10 years old, small, quiet, often invisible. People see a child, but inside me lives an orchestra of circuits, wires, and spinning rotors. While others played games, I disassembled radios, rebuilt drones, and listened to the hum of electricity like it was music. My grandmother, Eleanor, always said I was different, like my father, Captain Marcus Adams. His name still echoes in hushed conversations. A hero, they say. A man who flew into storms to pull others from ruin. A man who never came home. I don't remember much about him. Just fragments. The warmth of his calloused hands guiding mine as I held a tiny screwdriver. His voice explaining aerodynamics while fireflies blinked outside our porch. When he was gone, the house grew quieter, but my hands kept moving, my mind kept building. Arthur Sterling was just a name I heard whispered on TV. The billionaire genius. The man who once owed his life to my father. Now standing here, I was not just Chloe, the little girl. I was Marcus Adams's daughter. I carried his blood, his curiosity, his relentless need to understand. The world underestimated me. They always did. But wires don't care about age. Circuits don't ask for permission. And today, inside this hangar of desperate men, my moment arrived, as silent and certain as the desert moon. I still remember the night my father left for his final mission. The house smelled of motor oil and rain. Lightning danced across the distant mountains, casting brief shadows on our living room wall where blueprints hung like strange art. He knelt before me, his flight suit heavy with patches and meaning. "Chloe," he whispered, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear, "sometimes the world will forget how brilliant you are. Don't you ever forget." I clutched his badge that night as the helicopter's blades sliced the air like angry birds. My small hand pressed it to my chest, feeling its cold metal heartbeat against my skin. But he never returned. Only the badge came back, delivered by solemn hands and downcast eyes. Grandma Eleanor cried quietly. The world around us continued, indifferent. At school, teachers offered soft words. Classmates whispered, "She's the girl whose dad died." I became a shadow in the background, a curious mind trapped behind young eyes. I learned to listen more than speak, observe rather than demand. But every hum of an engine, every flicker of a faulty circuit spoke to me, as if my father was still teaching, still guiding. And tonight, in this steel cathedral of failure, his voice echoed again, quiet but insistent. "Look closely, Chloe. The answer is always there." The cafeteria buzzed with voices that weren't mine. I sat at the far edge of the table, where no one noticed if an extra chair was needed. The empty space beside me felt louder than the laughter that filled the room. They didn't mean to exclude me. But sometimes her sighs were heavier than her words. She would look at my scattered blueprints on the dining table and murmur, "Sweetheart, maybe you should play outside more." But how could I explain? Out there was noise. And here, in the ordered lines of circuits and clean calculations, I found peace. I was alone, but never lonely, with my father's old schematics like silent companions. Then came the day when trust fractured. I had spent weeks building a small drone from salvage parts. It hovered perfectly in our tiny backyard, stable even against the gusting Nevada wind. I ran inside, beaming with pride, eager to show Grandma. But when I returned, my cousin Adam stood over the shattered remains, his foot still resting on one of the twisted rotors. The smile he wore was cruel. "Oops," he said, feigning innocence. "Maybe your toy wasn't built that well after all." I knew the truth, but Grandma saw only the broken pieces. "Accidents happen, Chloe," she sighed, trying to console me. But her eyes held doubt. Adam leaned in, voice low. "No one cares about your stupid machines. Nobody ever will." That night, I stared at the ceiling, the weight of my father's badge resting on my chest. The stars outside blinked like patient witnesses. My hands trembled, but not from sadness, from something fiercer. The next morning, I made a choice. At breakfast, as Adam boasted about his latest video game score, I spoke, clear, steady. "You broke it on purpose," I said. Grandma froze mid-sip. Adam's face flushed. "Liar," he hissed. "I'm not lying. And I'm not afraid of you." Silence wrapped around us like thick fog. For the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in Adam's eyes. Grandma's expression shifted, uncertain. Each connection I made was a small rebellion, a defiant spark against the darkness that threatened to consume me. And for the first time, I felt the fragile beginning of something precious, dignity. I would not let fear define me. The questions haunted me. Why did they always see me as the problem? Why was my curiosity a burden rather than a gift? I couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling inside any longer. I needed answers, not just about school or Adam, but about who I truly was. One evening, in stacks of meticulously kept journals, his handwriting flowed across the pages like tiny mechanical rivers, precise, methodical, and full of purpose. I flipped through them, my fingers trembling. His diagrams detailed flight systems, vector controls, emergency fail-safes, blueprints not only for machines but for his mind. I traced his notes, realizing how deeply his passion for engineering ran. His words weren't just technical, they carried whispers of his soul. Then I found something unexpected. Between the pages of an old maintenance log was a faded photo of him standing beside a young Arthur Sterling. Both smiled beneath a desert sun, dressed in military gear. "Did Dad ever talk about Arthur?" I asked. She exhaled slowly, eyes softening. "Only once. He said Arthur was brilliant, but lost. Your father believed Arthur would change the world if he found his compass. And what about me?" My voice trembled. Her hand cupped my cheek gently. "You have his eyes, Chloe, and his heart. Never doubt that." Her words settled like a warm blanket over my restless mind. Later that day, I slipped my father's badge into my pocket and returned to the hangar. Inside, the atmosphere crackled with desperation. Frank Miller barked orders. Jake Peterson frantically cross-referenced schematics. And Arthur's tense voice echoed off the steel walls as he argued over satellite calls with Washington. No one noticed me slip closer to the Falcon X-7. I circled the jet's belly, scanning every exposed panel, every solder joint. Something wasn't right. The error logs they'd reviewed didn't add up. My father had taught me to listen. Not just to data, but to the machine itself. My fingers brushed along the thrust vector control unit. I paused. The serial number engraved on one of the microcontrollers glinted unnaturally under the overhead lights. It was off. Too new. Out of sequence. I pulled out my father's notebook, flipping quickly to his old sketches of standard military-grade microcontrollers. The specifications didn't match. Counterfeit. Either a defective component or a malicious replacement. Adrenaline surged through me. I turned toward Frank, who was reviewing thermal scans. "I think I know where the problem is," I said, louder than I intended. Heads turned. Frank's brow furrowed. Exasperated. "That's impossible. We vetted every supplier. But not this one." I pointed to the serial number. "Compare it to your master logs. You'll see." The room held its breath. Arthur's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but calculation. His voice cut through the tension. "Frank, check it." Frank reluctantly called up the inventory database. His fingers hovered, then flew across the keyboard. The numbers appeared. Mismatch. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Then Frank whispered, almost reverently, "She's right." The air shifted. Doubt transformed into stunned recognition. I stood there, my heart pounding, but my voice steady. "You can fix it, but you'll need a replacement microcontroller, and fast." Arthur's gaze softened. "The processor inside my drone," I began, "uses a civilian-grade chip with architecture nearly identical to your system. If we modify it, recalibrate the firmware, and adjust for thermal loads. It can substitute, at least temporarily, for tomorrow's demo. Frank's mouth opened, closed, then opened again. You want us to install a hobby-grade chip into a multi-billion-dollar defense prototype? Jake blinked, torn between fascination and fear. Arthur finally spoke, his voice quieter than expected. And it would work? I nodded. It can handle the test flight. If we keep the flight envelope within safe parameters, it'll perform better than nothing. I've done similar integrations on a smaller scale. Frank let out a hollow laugh, shaking his head. This is insane. No, I said softly. What's insane is letting this opportunity slip because we're afraid to try. The room filled with silence again. Only the distant hum of cooling fans punctuated the stillness. Arthur studied me carefully. His eyes weren't the eyes of a billionaire now. They were searching, almost haunted. Who taught you to think like this? He asked. My father, I whispered. Marcus Adams. The name fell into the air like a stone into still water. Frank stiffened. Jake's mouth formed a silent, oh. Arthur's expression shifted, as if unseen gears clicked into place within him. His voice cracked, barely audible. Marcus Adams. I nodded. Brenda Hayes, who had entered quietly moments earlier, stepped closer and spoke gently. Arthur, Marcus was the pilot who pulled you from that extraction zone. He was Chloe's father. The revelation hit him like a sudden gust. His breath wavered as memories flickered behind his eyes. I never knew he had a daughter, Arthur whispered. Brenda's voice carried the weight of years. He did, and from what I see, she inherited more than his name. Arthur rubbed his temples, as if steadying himself between past and present. Finally, he looked at Frank and Jake. Can this be done? Frank exhaled. Technically, it's risky, but if anyone knows that system better than us, it might just be her. Jake chimed in, newfound determination lighting his face. We need to recalibrate every parameter and rewrite portions of the flight control software. Arthur's voice was resolute now. Then let's start. Sarah Chen's voice crackled through Arthur's earpiece. Arthur, the board is on a secure call. They need your update. He tapped the earpiece but hesitated. Patch them through to conference. Seconds later, the voices of distant board members filled the speaker system. Angry, nervous, pressuring. Arthur, are you seriously considering trusting a child's toy to save this contract? This is reckless, borderline negligence. I cannot support this insanity. Arthur raised his hand, cutting through the storm. Gentlemen, ladies, listen to me. His voice was calm but firm, as steady as the Nevada horizon at dawn. 8 years ago, Marcus Adams risked his life to save mine. Today, his daughter stands before us with the solution no one else could see. But I am making this call. His voice turned to steel. We either take this chance, or we walk away from everything. The silence that followed was long, heavy, and absolute. Finally, a single board member murmured, God help us. Arthur ended the call without waiting for consensus. He turned toward me, the slightest glint of hope shining through the storm in his eyes. All right, Chloe, he said softly. Let's get to work. My pulse quickened. Frank and Jake moved toward the workbench, already discussing parameters and safety overrides. In that moment, I didn't feel small anymore. The world had cracked open, and I had stepped through. The storm outside was rising as if the desert itself held its breath alongside us. Inside the hangar, Frank's hands were steady now, no longer doubtful but focused. Jake typed furiously, rewriting the firmware to speak fluently with my salvaged microcontroller. My drone lay in pieces beside us, sacrificed without hesitation for something far greater. I watched them work, offering quiet corrections when parameters drifted or heat tolerances risked slipping. They listened. They trusted. The Department of Defense delegation marched in, a team of stone-faced men and women in dark suits, clipboards in hand, as sharp as scalpels. Their leader, Director Mitchell, moved forward, scanning the half-dismantled jet and the chaotic workstation with thinly veiled disapproval. Mr. Sterling, Mitchell began coolly. We received word that today's demonstration faced technical difficulties. Arthur stood tall. We encountered an unforeseen hardware fault, but my team has implemented a solution. Mitchell's eyes narrowed as they landed on me, small, grease-smudged, standing among adults. His tone dropped like an anchor. And this, team member? Arthur's jaw flexed. But before he could speak, I stepped forward, voice clear. My name is Chloe Adams, sir. I diagnosed the failure in the thrust vector control. The system is now operational. A low ripple of murmurs passed through the delegation. Mitchell raised an eyebrow. You expect me to believe a child repaired one of the most advanced flight prototypes in existence? I didn't flinch. Age has nothing to do with circuitry, sir. Mitchell glanced toward Frank and Jake, seeking confirmation. Frank met his gaze directly. She's correct. Without her intervention, we'd still be grounded. Jake added softly. Her assessment was not only accurate, it was the key. Mitchell's lips tightened. And you're willing to risk a multi-billion-dollar contract on a workaround built from civilian parts? Arthur's voice cut through like a blade. We're not risking it, Director. We're demonstrating resilience, adaptability, and the ability to resolve catastrophic failures under pressure. Qualities your department values. Mitchell studied him for a long moment before nodding curtly. Proceed. Outside. The technicians double-checked systems while Brenda relayed weather updates from the control tower. The storm front is accelerating, she reported. Visibility may drop below safe parameters within the hour. Arthur rubbed his temples. Then we don't wait. The hangar doors groaned open. The Nevada desert spilled its breath inside, hot and dry. The Falcon X-7 was towed onto the runway, its sleek frame gleaming under the afternoon sun that fought to pierce the swirling dust in the distance. Frank and Jake strapped into the control trailer while I monitored the telemetry screen, my heart thudding in rhythm with the blinking lights. Systems green, Jake called. Frank's voice was calm but laced with adrenaline. Engaging startup sequence. The engines ignited with a rising whine that vibrated through my bones, a mechanical symphony roaring to life. Slowly, he extended his hand. Congratulations, Mr. Sterling. Contract secured. A collective exhale swept through the hangar. Smiles broke like sunlight after rain. Arthur shook his hand firmly. Thank you, Director. Mitchell glanced at me one final time, and for the first time, his voice held something resembling warmth. Well done, Miss Adams. I nodded, my hand still trembling slightly. Thank you, sir. As the delegation departed, the storm finally arrived, swirling the desert into a golden blur behind them. But inside, for the first time in so long, my world felt perfectly still. The celebration was brief. After the storm of tension, there was only quiet. I stood outside the hangar beneath a bruised Nevada sky, watching the last slivers of sunlight sink beneath the mountains. The Falcon X-7 gleamed faintly under the distant floodlights, silent now, victorious, but somehow distant from me. I should have felt proud. I should have felt triumphant. But instead, something hollow gnawed at my chest. The others went back inside to debrief, to strategize, to talk about future partnerships and possibilities. I lingered in the growing dusk, my small frame swallowed by the immensity of the desert. What if it had failed? What if I had been wrong? Would anyone have forgiven me? Would Arthur? Frank? Jake? Would I have forgiven myself? The thought curled into my stomach like cold iron. I wrapped my arms around myself as the wind kicked up a faint whistle through the wire fences. I had carried my father's name into this place, his legacy, his sacrifice, and for a moment, the weight of that burden felt suffocating. My father was brave. He was strong. He saved lives. I was just me. What right did I have to stand where he once stood? I thought back to the stage at school, to the principal's soft voice hiding sharp pity, to Adam's cruel smirk when he shattered my drone, to the whispers behind my back. Weird, strange, unfit. Maybe they were right. What was I really doing here? I closed my eyes and felt the panic rise. The same quiet panic that had lived inside me since the night the officers arrived with folded flags and empty words of gratitude for my father's sacrifice. The same panic that whispered, "You are alone now." I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. Instead, I stood frozen beneath that vast open sky, feeling smaller than ever before. The door behind me creaked open. Soft footsteps approached, crunching against the gravel. It was Arthur. He stopped beside me, saying nothing at first, just standing there, his eyes following my gaze to the darkening mountains. "It's beautiful out here," he finally said, his voice low, almost reverent. "But it can make you feel very small, can't it?" I didn't answer. Arthur continued, his words deliberate. "I know that feeling. The night Marcus saved me. I remember looking up at the stars, certain I didn't deserve to live when others didn't make it. The guilt doesn't leave easily. I swallowed hard, surprised by the rawness of his words. He turned to me gently. But you stood in that hangar today, Chloe. You faced them all. You took responsibility. That takes courage. I shook my head, my voice barely a whisper. I was terrified. He smiled faintly. We all are. Every one of us. Fear never truly leaves, but you didn't let it paralyze you. That's what matters. The wind stirred again, sending my hair across my face like fine threads. Arthur placed his hand lightly on my shoulder. Your father would be proud of you. My breath hitched at those words. I didn't realize how deeply I had longed to hear them. I miss him, I said finally, my voice breaking. Sometimes I don't even know if I'm doing this for me or for him. Arthur's eyes softened with a kind sadness. It's okay not to know. You carry pieces of him, but you're also carving your own path. It's not wrong to honor both. The weight in my chest loosened slightly, like a knot being untied. For the first time in what felt like forever, I allowed myself to lean into the warmth of those words, to let my walls down. Even briefly, Arthur sat down on a nearby crate, motioning for me to join. I did. He spoke again, quieter now, like sharing a secret. When I first started this company, everyone thought I was too young, too reckless, too inexperienced. I failed many times. People mocked me. Investors abandoned me. But your father believed in me when almost no one else did. I listened closely. He told me that sometimes the world only sees weakness where it cannot yet recognize potential. That brilliance doesn't always come wrapped in the form people expect. Arthur looked at me, his gaze steady. You reminded me of that today. A tear finally slipped down my cheek, carried swiftly by the wind. I didn't wipe it away. For once, I let myself feel it all. Grief, pride, fear, relief. I wasn't perfect. I wasn't fearless. But I was still here, still standing. Arthur smiled softly. You belong here, Chloe. Not because of your father, but because of you. The stars blinked awake above us, scattered across the sky like scattered code in a dark, endless program, waiting to be deciphered. For the first time that day, I allowed myself to breathe deeply. I wasn't finished. Not yet. The days that followed felt like a dream balanced precariously on the edge of a blade. The success of the Falcon X, 7 flights spread quickly, first inside the company, then outward like ripples in a still pond. News outlets caught wind of the story. Headlines blared across screens in newspapers. Child prodigy saves billion-dollar defense deal. My face appeared beside Arthur's in articles, blogs, even television segments. Overnight, I became a symbol I never intended to be. Some call me a genius. Others whispered words like lucky fluke or publicity stunt. The weight of their voices pressed against me with every click, every broadcast, every new headline. I wasn't ready for this kind of attention. At school, the dynamic shifted sharply. The same classmates who once whispered behind my back now stared with wide-eyed curiosity. Some approached me with nervous admiration, asking questions about microcontrollers they barely understood. Others kept their distance, skeptical, their jealousy masked behind thin smiles. She got lucky. Adam scoffed loudly in the cafeteria one day, loud enough for everyone to hear. Anyone could have done what she did. I said nothing, but his words dug into my ribs like splinters. That night, the first hateful messages appeared online. Anonymous comments flooded my inbox. Probably faked the whole thing. Her dad was military. Bet they rigged it for PR. A kid playing with toys shouldn't be allowed near real tech. I stared at the glowing screen in the dim light of my room, the words burning into my brain like acid rain. My hands trembled, but not from fear, from the sheer weight of doubt piling onto my shoulders. Why did people hate so easily? Grandma found me hunched over, tears welling in my eyes. She sat beside me quietly, placing a gentle hand on my back. The silence between us was heavy but comforting. People fear what they don't understand, Chloe, she whispered. And some would rather tear down what shines than admit they cannot see the light themselves. Her words floated in the air, soft yet powerful. But I didn't ask for this, I confessed. Voice cracking. I just wanted to help. She smiled sadly. And you did. But doing something remarkable often means walking paths filled with stones. The next morning, things grew worse. An email from the Department of Defense's internal review arrived at Arthur's office. A formal investigation had been launched, not against him, but indirectly targeting my involvement. Was it safe? Was it ethical to allow an unlicensed minor to interfere with critical defense technology? The media seized the story like wolves. Panels of so-called experts debated my competence. Politicians weighed in, their voices dripping with opportunism. Commentators questioned Arthur's judgment, speculating whether this entire event was a desperate publicity grab. Arthur stood before the press, defending both the Falcon X7's success and my role in it. His voice was unwavering, but I saw the exhaustion behind his carefully measured words. Frank and Jake continued working on stabilizing the system for full deployment, but the atmosphere had shifted. Where once there was cautious optimism, now there was cold scrutiny. One evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, Arthur called me into his office. He sat behind his massive desk, fingers steepled, eyes clouded with concern. "They're coming after us now," he admitted. "They're questioning everything we've built." I swallowed hard. "Because of me?" He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Because of their fear, not your actions." I felt the familiar lump rise in my throat. Maybe I shouldn't have gotten involved. Arthur leaned forward, his voice firm but kind. "No, don't ever think that. You didn't create this storm. Chloe, you simply lit a candle in the dark, and now everyone's seeing what they wish they could deny." His words steadied me, but outside forces kept growing. Sarah Chin approached Arthur with fresh reports daily, legal threats, congressional inquiries, public backlash from competitors hoping to seize the moment. The stakes continued rising. The harshest blow came unexpectedly. A leaked document surfaced online, a classified internal memo suggesting that Arthur had authorized my involvement to secure sympathy votes from regulatory bodies. It was false, but truth mattered little in the viral world. Social media ignited. Exploiting a child for profit, engineering prodigy, or billionaire's pawn? The comments tore through me like wild thorns. No matter how far I scrolled, the vitriol seemed endless. The darkness returned, curling around my chest like smoke. Late that night, I sat alone under the wide-open Nevada sky. The stars cold and indifferent above me. My father's badge lay warm in my hand. I whispered to the wind, my voice shaking. "Dad, did I make everything worse?" No answer came, only the endless desert hum. But deep inside, a tiny ember still burned. I was scared, but I wasn't ready to give up. The morning after felt heavier than any before. Headlines still screamed my name. Screens still flashed with accusations. But beyond the noise, I noticed something strange. An email slipped quietly into my inbox. Subject: "I believe you. You must be Chloe." Her handshake was warm, steady. "I've read everything you've built. The adjustments you made to the thrust vector calibration? Brilliant." Arthur glanced at her, surprised. "You believe her work was sound?" "Absolutely," Evelyn replied confidently. "And you should too." Her words sliced through the lingering doubt in the room, like morning light breaking through storm clouds. Frank nodded slowly, his gruff skepticism softening. I knew she was sharp, but hearing it from someone with your credentials helps. Jake smiled faintly, offering me a small thumbs up. For the first time in days, the room no longer felt like a battlefield. We sat together for hours, poring over every modification, every recalibrated sequence. Evelyn questioned me rigorously, but not to doubt, only to understand. "You think in layers most adults can't manage," she finally said. "You're not guessing, Chloe. You're engineering." Her belief in me planted roots where my confidence had been cracked. Outside, news crews still circled like vultures. Commentators debated endlessly. But inside these walls, something important shifted. We were no longer isolated individuals fighting separate fires. We were becoming a team. That evening, as the sun dipped low, Arthur gathered us all around the long metal workbench. "This isn't just about one flight test anymore," he said quietly. "This is about protecting the truth." We all nodded. Evelyn spoke next. "I've contacted several colleagues, engineers, educators, ethical review panels, people who aren't swayed by politics. They're willing to step forward and verify Chloe's findings independently." Arthur smiled for the first time in days. "Good. We fight facts with facts." As word spread through our networks, something remarkable began to happen. Letters of support flooded in. University professors, aerospace specialists, child prodigy advocates, all lending their names to our defense. Scientific forums lit up with detailed discussions praising the ingenuity of the Falcon X7 modifications. And then, the messages from others like me started arriving. "I'm 12, and I've always loved building robots, but my teacher says it's not for girls. Seeing you gives me hope. My son is 9, Chloe. He saw your interview. He wants to become an engineer like you one day. Thank you for standing strong. You're showing all of us what's possible. Every message ignited a spark inside me. I wasn't alone. The wave of support grew stronger. Hashtags trended. Online petitions gained thousands of signatures. The narrative was shifting, pulled by the honest voices of people who understood, who cared. One evening, as I sat reading yet another message from a girl in Ohio, Arthur approached with a soft smile. You started something, Chloe. I looked up, puzzled. Started what? He gestured gently to the screen. A movement. His words sank in like warm rain after drought. It wasn't just about the Falcon X7 anymore. It wasn't even about me, fully. It was about every kid who felt too different, too strange, too small to be seen. It was about making space for brilliance where others only saw oddity. We were no longer defending an engineering fix. We were defending the right to be unconventional. Days later, the first major television interview was requested. Not for Arthur, but for me. Arthur sat with me beforehand, voice gentle. You don't have to do this if you don't want to. I stared at the floor, my fingers brushing against my father's badge in my pocket. No, I whispered. I want to. When the cameras rolled, the lights were blinding, but I kept my gaze steady. The interviewer leaned forward. Chloe, what do you say to those who believe you shouldn't have been involved? I paused, heart pounding. I say that ideas don't check your age before they arrive, I said softly. And sometimes, the best solutions come from people who see problems differently because they've always lived outside the expected. The interviewer blinked, stunned. As the interview aired, the tide shifted even further. My words were shared, quoted, turned into banners of encouragement across online communities. For the first time, the world was listening. For a moment, it felt like we had weathered the storm. But the quiet was only an illusion. The real storm hadn't arrived yet. 2 weeks after my interview aired, new headlines broke like lightning across every major network. Confidential documents leak. Sterling's history of shady military contracts. Suddenly, the focus shifted from my involvement to Arthur's entire career. Old accusations resurfaced, failed acquisitions, contracts awarded under questionable circumstances. Rumors of backdoor dealings during his early expansion years. The smear campaign was orchestrated, calculated. Arthur's enemies had waited for this moment, a moment of weakness. And now, they struck. Arthur called us into the conference room, his face harder than I had ever seen. They've gone after my past now, he said quietly. They know they couldn't discredit Chloe, so they're trying to poison everything around her. Frank clenched his fists. Who leaked it? Arthur shook his head. Doesn't matter. They have connections deep inside Washington. The hearings are being scheduled already. Evelyn spoke calmly. They'll use this to argue you exploited Chloe for personal gain, that this entire program is built on questionable foundations. The weight of her words filled the room like heavy sand. And yet, strangely, I wasn't afraid in the way I used to be. The fear was there, but it no longer ruled me. We fight, I said softly. Arthur turned toward me, surprised. Chloe. I met his gaze, steady. We fight, but we fight with truth. Over the next several days, the campaign against Arthur exploded into full force. Detailed investigations that dismantled the false narratives one piece at a time. Supporters flooded social media, sharing their own stories of being dismissed for being young, different. I sat beside him at the long table, my hands folded tightly in my lap. The lead senator, a tall man with a voice like cold steel, began the questioning. Mr. Sterling, let's speak plainly. Why did you allow an unsupervised minor to participate in the repair of a classified prototype? Arthur answered steadily. Because she was the only one who found the solution. The senator raised an eyebrow. You expect us to believe that a child possessed knowledge your entire team lacked? I leaned forward, my voice firm but respectful. Sir, with all due respect. Solutions don't ask how old you are before they arrive. Gasps rippled through the gallery. The senator narrowed his eyes at me. And what qualifies you, Miss Adams, to handle technology of this scale? I took a breath, steadying my voice. I've studied engineering principles since I was 6. I've rebuilt, recalibrated, and reprogrammed flight systems based on my father's teachings. And when I identified a hardware anomaly, I offered a solution based on verified microcontroller schematics. Evelyn slid forward documents backing my every word. The senator shifted, annoyed that I wasn't breaking. Another committee member tried a different tactic. Mr. Sterling, isn't it true that your relationship with Marcus Adams creates a personal conflict that clouded your judgment? Arthur didn't flinch. Marcus Adams gave his life during a mission to rescue my team. I owe him everything, but that debt did not cloud my decision. Chloe's abilities earned my trust. I watched them try every angle, painting us as reckless, manipulative, desperate for contracts. And still, we answered each accusation with quiet, relentless truth. Hours passed. Finally, Evelyn requested permission to present independent expert testimony. Scientists, professors, even former military engineers stepped forward to validate my work and the technical decisions made. The facts were undeniable. By the end of the hearing, something shifted. The committee's questions softened. The audience's posture relaxed. Even some of the once hostile faces on the panel now seemed more curious than condemning. As we walked out of the chamber into the flashing lights of cameras, Arthur leaned toward me and whispered, "You were brilliant." The wind outside carried the sharp scent of rain in the distance. For the first time since the storm began, I felt the tide finally turning. The truth was winning. Victory doesn't come free. The morning after the hearing, headlines shifted dramatically. Sterling cleared of wrongdoing. Falcon X, 7 programmed to proceed. Child prodigy Chloe Adams vindicated. But beneath the celebration, quiet losses began to surface, losses no camera crew could capture. Arthur's company stock rebounded but never fully recovered to its former peak. Several investors, rattled by the scandal, quietly withdrew. 2 major partnerships dissolved under the weight of lingering suspicion. Sarah Chin, Arthur's closest advisor, handed in her resignation days later. "I believe in you both," she said quietly, avoiding eye contact. "But the board's fractured now. I've lost the trust one needs to do my job." Her departure stung more than I expected. She had fought us hard at first, but in the end, she defended us too. Arthur tried to mask his disappointment, but I could feel the wear behind his smile. And me? My world changed in subtler, sharper ways. Some people at school now idolized me, approaching with wide eyes, asking questions they didn't even understand. But their attention wasn't rooted in real respect. It was all tangled with discomfort. Others avoided me entirely, intimidated by my sudden visibility. But Adam doubled down. "You think you're famous now?" he hissed one afternoon behind the school building. "You're just a freak who got lucky. You embarrassed the whole family." I stood still as his words sliced through the dry air. Once, his cruelty would have shattered me. Now it only stung. "I didn't do this for fame," I said quietly. "And I'm not afraid of you anymore." He sneered but didn't respond. For the first time, I saw something flicker in his eyes, not victory, but uncertainty. At home, the pressure found Grandma too. Paparazzi camped outside our neighborhood for weeks. Camera flashes pierced our windows at night. Phone calls came from strangers, reporters, even people pretending to be long-lost relatives. Every knock at the door made her flinch. One evening, as she closed the blinds tightly, she sighed, her voice tired. I waited outside his office for over an hour. When the door finally opened, Brenda stepped out, surprised to see me. "Chloe," she said gently, "he's exhausted. It's not a good time." I nodded, forcing a smile. I understand. But I didn't. Not fully. I missed him. We had shared a bond, 2 lives once tangled by fate, finding unexpected family in one another. Now, that thread felt frayed. Alone in my room, I clutched my father's badge tightly, staring out at the moonlit desert. Had I gained the world only to lose pieces of myself? The media slowly moved on, hungry for news stories. The paparazzi faded, but my name lingered like a strange shadow I couldn't escape. I stopped checking my messages. I withdrew from my classmates. I stopped tinkering with my drone. For the first time since my father's death, I felt truly hollow. One afternoon, as I sat beneath the willow tree behind our house, Grandma approached with 2 mugs of hot chocolate. She sat beside me, handing me one silently. We sipped for a while before she spoke. "You're grieving," she said softly. I blinked. "I'm not sad, Grandma." She smiled gently, surprising me. Grandma reached over, pulling me into a gentle embrace. "You don't have to carry this alone," she whispered. "Not now. Not ever." I held the envelope for a long time before whispering to myself, "Maybe." The next morning, I told Grandma I was going. She simply nodded and packed me a lunch. No advice, no warnings, just quiet support. Arthur met me at the gate, his suit gone, replaced by jeans and a simple gray shirt. He looked different, less polished, more human. He led me through the facility. Arthur smiled. And you never will. But learning should bring you joy, not chains. We sat together for hours in that small lab, talking not of contracts or politics, but of circuits, algorithms, and crazy new ideas. The world outside could wait. In here, it was just passion, pure, quiet, unburdened. As the sun dipped lower, casting amber rays through the lab's small window, I woke before the sun fully rose, the faint orange glow creeping across my bedroom wall. The world outside still hummed with distant traffic, but inside our home, it was peaceful. Some simply doodles that made no real sense yet. But that didn't matter. For once, the act of creating was enough. Sometimes, Grandma would join me under the tree, knitting quietly as I scribbled. Arthur visited often too, but as a mentor, not a CEO. He no longer carried the tension of before. His face was lighter now, his voice relaxed. We'd sit together for hours, discussing theoretical designs that might never leave the pages of my journal, and that was perfectly okay. You've reminded me why I started all of this, Chloe, he said one evening as the sun dipped low. Before the contracts, before the investors, it was always about the joy of invention. I nodded. It still is. Outside those walls, life continued its slow rhythm. News outlets found new stories. The hearings faded into memory. My name slipped from trending topics, replaced by fresher controversies. And though some articles still reference me now and then, they no longer define me. I was no longer the girl who saved Falcon X7. I was just Chloe again. One Saturday morning, Evelyn surprised me with an invitation. I've started a small support group, she said. Young inventors, engineers, programmers, kids like you who often feel like they don't fit in. She paused, searching my face. Would you like to join us? The thought made my heart race. To not just build alone, to meet others who saw the world through strange angles and impossible questions like I did. It felt exciting. I'd love to, I whispered. The following week, I walked into a small room filled with nervous but eager faces. Boys and girls of all ages surrounded workbenches cluttered with half-finished projects. As introductions began, I realized something profound. I was no longer the odd one out. We were all odd here, and that made us home. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up, my voice steady but warm. My name is Chloe. I like building things that don't exist yet, and I'm still learning every single day. The group smiled, not with awe, not with judgment, just with shared understanding. That night, as Grandma tucked me in, she kissed my forehead like always. You're happy, she whispered. I smiled beneath the covers. I am. And as I drifted into sleep, I knew this simple truth. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. Autumn arrived gently that year. The desert heat softened, and cool breezes threaded through the fading golden leaves outside my window. Change no longer felt like an ambush. It felt like part of breathing. One afternoon, Evelyn suggested something unexpected. Have you thought about visiting the base again? She asked softly. We drove out together under a pale blue sky streaked with wisps of cirrus clouds. The desert shimmered, endless and quiet, as the car hummed over long stretches of asphalt. The moment the hangar appeared on the horizon, its familiar steel frame catching the sun, I felt a strange mix of comfort and tension stir inside me. Arthur glanced over. You okay? I nodded. I think so. Inside, the hangar looked much the same. The Falcon X7 sat center stage, its gleaming body flawless, restored and perfected after months of refinements. Technicians moved about quietly, respectful but busy. The chaos that once consumed this place had faded into a calm hum of routine engineering. But my eyes weren't drawn to the jet. They found the corner workbench where I once stood trembling, my tiny drone spread in pieces beside the failing flight system. I stepped closer. The bench had been cleared. But I could still see ghostly imprints in my mind, Frank's skeptical frown, Jake's curious glances, Arthur's silent calculations, and my own small hands hovering nervously over exposed circuitry. For a long time, I stood there, breathing it in. Arthur joined me. This is where everything changed, he said softly. I nodded, and almost fell apart. He chuckled gently. That too. We fell into a comfortable silence. After a while, I whispered something I hadn't even realized I was holding inside. I was so scared that day. Arthur's voice was low, full of understanding. So was I. The confession made me smile, two people from different worlds, both terrified, both stepping forward anyway. I ran my hand along the smooth steel edge of the table. But I don't regret it, I said finally. Not any of it. Arthur smiled, pride shining in his eyes. Neither do I. Before leaving, I wandered briefly into the storage wing, where my father's old technical notebooks were now carefully archived, his handwriting preserved in neat rows. I traced my fingertips over the spines of the binders, as if touching a piece of him still living here. And then, I quietly whispered, "Thank you, Dad." The words lingered in the still air like a quiet promise. When we returned home that evening, Grandma was waiting on the porch with 2 mugs of cocoa. "How was it?" she asked. I sat beside her, pulling the blanket tighter around my shoulders. It felt like finally closing a door. I answered softly, but not locking it, just leaving it in peace. She smiled knowingly. Sometimes that's all we need. A few days later, another invitation arrived, this time from someone I hadn't seen face to face in months, Adam. I was surprised. The message was short and awkward. "Hey, can we talk?" Grandma, reading the uncertainty on my face, simply said, "If you're ready." We met after school beneath the willow tree, the same one where I'd written so many sketches, whispered so many hopes, and fought so many fears. Adam stood with his hands buried in his pockets, eyes shifting nervously. I wanted to say something," he started. I waited. "I was a jerk," he admitted, voice low. "For a long time." His words weren't grand or dramatic. They were small, raw, and surprisingly hard for him to say. "I guess I thought, if I made you feel smaller, I wouldn't feel so small next to you." The honesty in his voice caught me off guard. I looked at him, not as an enemy, but as a boy still learning how to carry his own insecurities. "I appreciate you saying that," I replied quietly. "I never wanted to be bigger than anyone. I just wanted to build." He kicked at the dirt. "Yeah, I know." There was no hug, no grand reconciliation, just a nod, simple and human. And somehow that was enough. Later that night, as I wrote in my journal beneath soft lamplight, I realized something had shifted deep inside me. The fear that once ruled me had faded. The guilt that once haunted me had softened. Even the pain of being different no longer felt like isolation. I closed the journal gently, whispering into the quiet room, "I'm not who I was." And the wind outside answered softly through the open window. I was something new. The idea first came quietly. Like so many others, a small flicker while I sat beneath the willow tree, sketching. What if my story could help others? Not just the few kids I'd met through Evelyn's group, but anyone who felt invisible. Anyone who had been told they were too young, too strange, too much. I turned to Evelyn with the thought one afternoon. What if I share everything? The whole story, not for attention, but so no one feels as alone as I did. She smiled gently, like she had been waiting for me to say it. "Stories have power, Chloe, especially when they come from truth." Arthur offered me the full support of his media team. They were used to press conferences and corporate statements, but that wasn't what I wanted. No studios, I told him. No producers. Just me, talking, honestly. And so, late one Saturday evening, Grandma set up her old handheld camera in the living room. The only lights were the soft glow of the table lamp and the desert moon outside. We recorded it in a single take. I sat there, hands folded, my father's badge resting gently beside me on the table. "My name is Chloe Adams," I began softly, and for a long time, I thought being different meant I was broken. The words flowed naturally. The fear, the accusations, the mistakes, the victory. And most importantly, the moments when I nearly gave up. I spoke about Adam, about school, about the silent battles few people ever see. And then I looked straight into the camera. But what I've learned is this: your voice matters. Your curiosity matters. And even if the world tells you to be quiet, speak anyway. Because you never know who needs your voice to find their own. When we finished, Grandma wiped her eyes softly. "That was beautiful, sweetheart." We uploaded the video that night. I expected a few people to watch. Maybe my small group from Evelyn's class. Maybe some friends Arthur shared it with. I never expected what came next. Within 48 hours, the video had gone viral. Hundreds of thousands of views. Then millions. Comments flooded in from all over the world. I showed this to my daughter. She finally believes she can pursue engineering now. I've always felt like an outsider in my job. This gave me courage to keep pushing. Thank you, Chloe. You're helping kids I haven't even met yet. The hashtag spread like wildfire. Hashtag build anyway. Hashtag voices matter. Hashtag young and capable. News programs picked up the story again. But this time, not with scandal or controversy, but hope. Headlines shifted. From prodigy to advocate, Chloe Adams inspires global movement. I felt something steady inside me. Not nerves, not fear, something warmer. You might think you don't belong in rooms where decisions happen, I told them. But rooms are just spaces. What fills them, what matters, is who's brave enough to walk in anyway. The room was silent, hanging on every word. And afterward, as the kids lined up to talk to me, I saw something familiar in their eyes. The spark I once carried alone, now shining in many faces. Arthur watched from the back, arms crossed, smiling. You become something much bigger than a flight test, he told me quietly after. You're building a bridge for others. More talks followed. Evelyn joined me on several trips. It wasn't just scholarships or fancy labs. It was mentorship, support, safe spaces for experimentation, and, most of all, encouragement. The initiative launched its first Intellect garage not far from where I once stood trembling in that hangar. And as we cut the ribbon, surrounded by kids tinkering with open circuit boards and half-built drones, I whispered to Evelyn, "This is only the beginning." She squeezed my shoulder gently. "Yes, Chloe, and you built it." Sometimes, late at night, I sit beneath the willow tree and watch the stars spread across the Nevada sky. It's quieter now. The world no longer presses against me like it once did. And in those quiet spaces, I ask myself the question people so often ask me. If you could go back, would you change anything? The hearings, the headlines, the fear, the endless judgment. I close my eyes and let the question sit heavy in my chest for a moment before answering always the same answer. No, I wouldn't change any of it. Because every step, every stumble, every breathless moment of doubt shaped not just who I am, but who I'm still becoming. If I hadn't stood in that hangar, if I hadn't spoken, even while trembling, if I hadn't faced the harsh glare of cameras and judgment, I wouldn't be here now watching new kids solder wires together in the Intellect garage. Watching sparks fly not just from their machines, but from inside their eyes. I wouldn't have met Evelyn. I wouldn't have seen Arthur become more than a mentor, become family. I wouldn't have found my voice. The truth is, growth lives inside struggle. The fractures let the light in. As my father once whispered into my ear so many years ago, sometimes the world won't recognize how brilliant you are. Don't you forget. For a long time, I did forget. Or maybe I never fully believed it in the first place. But now I do. I know I belong. And strangely, I'm grateful even for the pain. The fear sharpened my understanding. The pressure forged resilience. The doubts taught me compassion for myself and for others who still carry those invisible weights. The people who judged me, I no longer carry anger for them. The headlines that once tore me apart, they no longer hold power over my heart. Even Adam, whose words once cut deepest, has become little more than a quiet page in my long story. No longer needing to be rewritten or erased. Just closed gently. The strange thing about pain is that when you stop fearing it, you begin to see it for what it is. A teacher. Every moment of shame taught me courage. Every moment of dismissal taught me patience. Every empty seat at the lunch table taught me empathy. Every mocking word taught me grace. And every terrifying step into the unknown taught me how much I was capable of. I sometimes watch recordings of the Falcon X-7 flight, not out of pride, but to remind myself how close I came to walking away, how easily fear could have silenced me forever. But it didn't, and that has made all the difference. I carry my father's badge with me still, not out of grief, but as a quiet promise that I will keep building, that I will keep learning, that I will keep speaking even when my voice shakes. I knew exactly what I wanted to write. I wasn't writing equations tonight. I was writing to her, to me, to the version of myself who once sat alone in her room, afraid of being too much and not enough all at once. I let the pen rest on the paper for a moment before beginning. Dear Chloe, the Chloe from those heavy days. The one who sat under the willow tree, clutching Dad's badge like it was the only anchor you had left. The one who whispered into the dark, wondering if anyone would ever see you. The words came slowly, carefully, as if I was afraid of breaking something fragile. You thought being different was something to hide. You feared the eyes of others, the weight of their words, the laughter behind your back. You learned early what it meant to feel small, even when your mind felt so big inside your chest. I paused, breathing. And yet, through all of that, you never stopped building, even when they didn't understand, even when they called you strange, Even when they tried to break your confidence piece by piece, you kept building. A tear slid down my cheek, but I smiled through it. You were stronger than you ever knew. And one day, that quiet courage led you to a hangar full of people who doubted you again. But this time, you spoke. I closed my eyes, seeing it all again. The blinding lights, the skeptical eyes, the trembling in my hands. You spoke because something deep inside refused to stay silent any longer. And when you spoke, the world shifted. Not because you were flawless, not because you had all the answers, but because you were willing to stand where no one expected you to stand. The wind outside rustled softly, like applause from the desert itself. You faced storms louder than any you ever imagined. The world tried to reduce you to headlines and debates. They questioned your worth, your intentions, your abilities. They tried to drown you in voices that didn't belong to you. I let my hand rest for a moment, the ink drying beneath my fingertips. But you held on. You found your people. Arthur, who saw you. Evelyn, who guided you. Grandma, who loved you no matter what. And the countless voices who whispered, "Me too." You weren't alone. To the girl I once was. Rest now. I'll carry us from here. Another evening beneath the willow. The air was still, as if the desert itself had paused to listen. The journal lay open again. But this time, the letter wasn't to me. It was for him. For Adam. For every version of him who stood between me and the version of myself I had fought to become. The pen hovered before touching paper. Dear Adam, there was a time I wished you would hurt the way I hurt. The words came slower now, heavier. When you broke my drone, you didn't just snap wires or blades, you tried to break something far more fragile. You tried to break my voice, my sense of belonging, my courage. I swallowed, feeling old echoes stir inside my chest. And when you whispered to others, when you fed them the easy lies, she's weird, she's showing off, she got lucky. You didn't see the nights I cried alone afterward. You didn't see the way those words echoed louder than any applause ever could later. I paused, staring at the desert sky. The stars blinked gently, as if encouraging me to keep going. I wanted to be small because of you. To shrink myself so I wouldn't draw attention. To stop asking questions. To stop building. The wind picked up slightly, cool against my cheek. But I didn't. The next lines came steadier. And now, looking back, I finally understand something I couldn't see then. You weren't trying to break me because you hated me. You were trying to protect yourself. My hand trembled briefly, but I let the words keep flowing. You saw something in me that frightened you. Maybe it made you feel smaller. Maybe you feared others would compare us and find you lacking. So instead of building your own light, you tried to dim mine. The honesty stung even as it healed. And for a long time, I carried that hurt like armor, convinced I needed to keep resenting you to stay strong. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the next words form not from anger, but from something far more difficult, release. But I don't hate you anymore. The sentence sat quietly on the page, breathing. I won't pretend your words didn't scar me. They did. But those scars became roots. And those roots helped me grow into someone who doesn't need your approval. Someone who isn't defined by who tried to silence her. The pen glided more easily now. As if the hardest part had passed. You were part of my story. An important part. But you don't own my story. The air grew still again. I hope one day you find your own peace. I hope you learn that someone else shining doesn't mean you're dimmed. That competition isn't survival. That there's room for both of us under this vast sky. A soft exhale slipped from my lips as the final lines arrived. I forgive you. Not because you've asked for it. Not because you've earned it. But because carrying your weight no longer serves me. I gently closed the journal, resting my hand over the cover. The release was quiet. There was no grand sense of victory, no dramatic closure. Just lightness. Just the space where anger had once lived, now empty and calm. Grandma stepped outside, her silhouette soft in the moonlight. Writing again? She asked gently. I nodded, voice light. Yes. Steady witnesses to the fact that healing rarely comes with noise. It comes with breathing, with letting go, with choosing not to carry what no longer belongs in your hands. And beneath that quiet desert sky, I let the last of it drift away. The house was quiet, filled only with the soft rhythm of evening air slipping through open windows. The desert outside lay still, blanketed beneath a silvered sky, where stars blinked softly, indifferent yet oddly comforting. I sat alone beneath the willow tree. The world no longer demanded anything from me in this moment. The moon hung high above, casting pale light across the yard. Its glow touched the willow's arching limbs, painting shifting patterns on the ground around me. Still, I said nothing. Grandma peeked from the porch once, checking on me. She didn't call out. She simply smiled, her figure illuminated by the house's faint lamplight. She understood. This was not a moment for conversation, it was one for stillness. The night whispered, not with words, but with its presence. A language older than speech, richer than explanation. The hum inside me, once filled with racing thoughts, now slowed. My breath synced with the air around me, long and even. I watched as a lone moth danced beneath the porch light. I wasn't the prodigy or the cautionary tale. I was simply Chloe, a girl sitting beneath her willow tree. And that, in itself, was enough. The desert's stillness held me, not as a cage, but as a cradle. For the first time in what felt like years, my shoulders released their tension completely. My heartbeat slowed not from exhaustion, but from peace. The sky stretched infinitely above, stars scattered like silent witnesses. I traced their patterns with my eyes, inventing new constellations that only I would ever see. The breeze shifted, cool but gentle, brushing strands of hair across my cheeks. I didn't push them away. I let them fall where they may. I closed my eyes briefly, allowing the world to exist without my gaze, trusting its rhythm to continue whether I watched or not. And it did. The ground beneath me, solid. The tree above, protective. The air, steady. The stars, patient. Even my own heartbeat, once frantic, now moved like a soft drum, quiet and sure. Eventually, I opened my eyes again, not because I needed to, but because the moment had carried me as far as it could. I looked once more toward the house. The light still glowed faintly in Grandma's room. Safe. Familiar. The world beyond my backyard remained distant, but not threatening. Its noise would return soon enough, opportunities, challenges, questions, but tonight, it was not allowed inside this circle. Tonight belonged to stillness, to breath, to healing, to simply being. And beneath that endless Nevada sky, I sat, silent, whole, present. The sun stretched its first soft rays across the horizon, slipping through the slats of my window, brushing warmth across my face. Morning had arrived quietly, without announcement or fanfare, simply and faithfully. I sat at my desk, fingers lightly resting on the closed journal, steady, and spoke. Hello. If you're watching this, you might feel like you don't belong, like your voice is too small or your ideas too strange. My hands folded in my lap, fingers weaving unconsciously as the words flowed. I once thought that, too. I believed being different was something to hide. But different isn't wrong. It's simply unexplored. I paused, letting the truth settle before continuing. There were days when I wanted to give up, when the noise felt louder than my courage. But every step forward, even the shaky ones, led me here. The room remained still. The only sound was my own voice, calm and certain. You don't have to be perfect to begin. You don't have to have every answer to be worthy of asking questions. The weight of those words came not from theory, but from living them. I hope my story reminds you that brilliance doesn't ask permission, that your ideas matter, and most importantly, that you're not alone. I smiled softly. Keep building. Keep dreaming. Even if the world doesn't understand yet. Especially then. The light on the camera faded as I ended the recording. Grandma approached, placing her hand gently on my shoulder. That was beautiful, sweetheart. Thank you. I whispered, my voice light. Later that afternoon, Arthur called again. Your video's already spreading, he said with a quiet pride. People are sharing it everywhere. The initiative's inbox is full of kids wanting to join, parents writing in, teachers reaching out. I smiled into the phone, feeling the familiar warmth rise in my chest. It's not really about me anymore, I replied. Arthur laughed gently. No, it's much bigger now. We spoke for a while longer about the upcoming mentorship programs, new workshops, young innovators emerging every day. Each name, each face. A reminder that what started in fear had become something full of hope. After the call, I returned to the willow tree. The leaves swayed gently above, their quiet dance steady as always. The wind whispered across my skin, cool and kind. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting everything settle. The past no longer chased me. The future no longer frightened me. And the present? It held me gently, like an old friend. As the sun dipped behind distant mountains, casting long golden fingers across the landscape, I whispered aloud, more to the sky than anyone else. Thank you. For the journey. For the lessons. For the voices that once doubted, and for the ones who believed. Night crept in slowly, not with darkness, but with soft indigo hues and the familiar flicker of stars returning once more. I stood, brushing dust from my jeans, and headed back toward the house, where Grandma waited with warm cocoa and the soft glow of lamplight. Before closing the door behind me, I paused and looked back once more. The sky, vast and patient. The tree, rooted and graceful. The world, wide open. And my story, still unfolding.